Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're the podcast where we take complex stories, unpack them, pull out the key insights for you, basically give you a shortcut to being really well informed. Today, we're plunging into the, pretty remarkable journey of Alberto Daniel Hill. Now, you might know his name maybe as a cybersecurity expert, but his story goes so much deeper. It's marked by really profound personal adversity, including the almost unimaginable experience of being the first person in Uruguay imprisoned for a computer-related crime, a crime he absolutely claims he didn't commit. Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission today is to trace how Alberto Daniel Hill, after facing just immense personal and professional trauma, found his voice, how he built this unique platform on social media, specifically Twitter, X now, and particularly Twitter Spaces. He used these tools not just to share his own harrowing story, but really to foster a whole new kind of community engagement and, crucially, to generate this powerful, raw, unscripted content for his podcast, Cyber Midnight Club. It's really a testament to resilience, and strategic digital engagement and just the power of authentic storytelling.
It really is. And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how his intensely personal saga, this awful experience, became the catalyst for something much, much bigger than just his own healing. We're looking at a compelling real-world case study. It's about leveraging digital platforms for some powerful advocacy, for building a unique kind of trust, which is so hard these days in an era just rife with deception. And like you said, for creating that raw, unfiltered content that doesn't just inform people, but genuinely educates and empowers listeners. It's hearing directly from those who truly live these experiences. That transforms individual injustice into potentially a collective force for change. It really shows how a personal crisis can evolve into a global mission, really.
That's a truly profound transformation. I mean, going from that isolation to having a widespread influence. So let's start at the beginning. Let's detail Alberto Daniel Hill's early career and those pivotal traumatic events that just completely reshaped his life. Before, say, late 2014, Alberto was already deeply involved in IT and cybersecurity. He actually held this remarkably significant role, a pioneering one, really. He was the first IT expert, or perito, in Uruguay to work on a child pornography case. This was because of new laws being implemented there pre-2004. So we're talking about the very, very early days of digital forensics in Uruguay.
Yeah, and it's really crucial to understand the context of that early exposure. Think about it. He was tasked with counting over 3,000 images. Just an unimaginable volume of profoundly disturbing content. He describes it himself as mentally twisting his perception of humanity. It essentially poisoned his worldview.
God, I can't even imagine.
Right. Imagine the sheer mental and emotional toll of that kind of work, day in, day out. He was confronting the absolute darkest corners of the digital world, and doing it from the perspective of someone trying to do good, trying to expose these horrific wrongdoings and bring some justice. So this harrowing experience, understandably, led to severe burnout by December 2014. He had to step away from that specific line of work just to prioritize his own mental health. It laid this complex foundation, resilience, yes, but also this deep vulnerability that would define his later, even more challenging journey. He already knew firsthand the pervasive dangers and the psychological costs of that digital underworld.
Absolutely. And then just a few short years later, he found himself in an even more infamous and personally devastating situation. In September 2017, Alberto was arrested. It was part of what became known as Operation Bitcoin. He became, infamously, the first person in Uruguay sent to prison for a computer crime. Again, a crime he vehemently maintains he did not commit. He spent 8 long months in preventative prison, a period so traumatic it even led to him falling into a coma.
Yeah, the impact of this experience, especially following his earlier trauma with the child exploitation material, it is utterly devastating. He recounted how the media just completely destroyed his image. They didn't just report the arrest, they painted him as, quote, the worst cyber criminal, cyber terrorist on earth, a figure of public scorn.
Wow.
And worse, he was effectively doxed by police press releases. His personal information name, face details making him identifiable, just put out there publicly, instantly turned him into this notorious figure in his own country. He went from being a respected pioneer in digital forensics to overnight a pariah. The mental weight of that, the public humiliation on top of the personal trauma and the imprisonment, it's almost impossible to truly grasp.
It sounds like a complete loss of identity, just a total dismantling of his life. So, okay, he's out of prison, his reputation is in tatters. He's lost millions of dollars in cryptocurrency assets because he was imprisoned, a sum he now thinks could be worth around $10 million with current Bitcoin prices. Just staggering loss. And critically, traditional media won't give him a voice. They've already tried and convicted him in the court of public opinion. So how does someone in that position, stripped of so much, even begin to rebuild? What do you do when every local avenue for truth, for transparency, seems completely closed off?
And that's exactly the turning point, isn't it? If we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises this really profound question. In a world where local avenues for truth are systematically shut down, where do you turn? For Alberto, his most valuable asset, as he puts it, upon his release, was literally his cell phone. He carried it out of prison. That was his immediate, tangible connection to the outside world. And very soon, it became his connection to a global audience. His realization was profound. Okay, maybe his country of only 3 million people might not listen, or maybe they'd already made up their minds based on the media narrative. But as he said, there are 7-8 billion people out there that are willing to listen to my story. This wasn't just a realization, it was a strategic revelation. It completely redefined his path forward.
So his first step towards rebuilding, toward finding that voice again, was turning to social media, specifically Twitter. That was his outlet. How did that initial phase look?
Exactly. And initially it was just raw, completely unfiltered outpouring. He used Twitter to express, quote, all those feelings of hate and anger that he harbored. Anger towards the system, the people involved in this case, the profound sense of injustice he felt. He was consumed by those really strong negative emotions, anger, hate, even a natural, maybe dangerous desire for revenge.
Understandable, I suppose.
Totally understandable. And this initial phase was actually a vital coping mechanism. It was a way to release the immense pressure, the frustration of being publicly vilified and denied any platform to tell his side. But he was also acutely aware, even then, that these feelings, while completely natural given what he went through, weren't going to help him recover or move forward constructively. He noted this struggle with negative emotions lasted for years. It slowly vanished, he said, but it remained this deep-seated part of him. The process of accepting what happened, learning those incredibly difficult lessons, and moving on without looking back, but still using the experience as something valuable that was anything but easy.
Yeah, that sounds like a monumental internal battle.
It really was. It took a long time, stretching probably until early 2022, when his legal case finally closed, for him to truly process and accept these immense losses, both the financial ones and the personal ones, without that internal pain. So this wasn't just about, firing off angry tweets. It was about a profound internal transformation happening alongside it. Remember, he had tried repeatedly to contact the most important journalists and TV shows in Uruguay. They all knew his story. They often found it compelling, he said.
And nobody would touch it.
None of them ever followed through with an interview. He was effectively silenced by traditional media. That left him with only his cell phone and the vast global reach of Twitter to seek an audience for his truth. So that transition from just raw emotional release on Twitter to a more strategic, purposeful use of the platform for advocacy, that demonstrates an incredible level of personal growth and resilience. He realized, okay, my local world shut me out, but the digital world, that offers boundless possibility.
That's a really powerful shift, moving from just a desperate emotional outlet to a calculated strategic move for global reach and ultimately vindication and impact. And that leads us right into the next phase of his digital journey, doesn't it? He wasn't just content with static tweets, he evolved his presence into something far more dynamic. His presence grew, it wasn't just static. So how did he evolve this? How did he create this live platform that would become so central to his digital strategy?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is how incredibly organic this evolution was. It wasn't some pre-planned, highly structured media launch with a big strategy document, It started almost by accident. Alberto kicked off an initial test space on Twitter. The topic was seemingly innocuous: romance scams.
Okay.
He later admitted he actually intended for it to be conducted in a sarcastic and ironic way, almost like a lighthearted or maybe cynical take on the subject. But what happened was completely unexpected and transformative. Because of this, as he put it, unplanned convergence of victims, former criminals, and experts in different fields who just happened to join the space.
Just showed up.
The discussion quickly deepened. It went from this potentially sarcastic exploration into a really serious, profoundly empathetic discussion platform. It had this organic depth and raw candor. And this revealed to Alberto this huge unmet appetite for raw, direct, unscripted conversations on these often taboo, highly sensitive topics. And this unique environment, it was largely fostered by Alberto's own radical transparency and authenticity.
Radical transparency. That sounds like a remarkably brave approach, maybe incredibly risky, especially for someone who had already been so publicly scrutinized and, well, maligned. What exactly did that entail for him?
It absolutely is
Yeah,
brave
Mister.
and risky, and it's not just a buzzword for him. It's a deliberate, tactical core theme of his whole approach. Alberto's willingness to share profoundly personal details, including past mistakes, his own experiences with cyber attacks, it's incredibly disarming. He would openly state things like, I have been hacked. Okay, I've even hacked myself out of curiosity once, infecting myself with a RAT, a remote access Trojan.
Wow, okay, he admits that publicly.
Openly. And it's not just confessing for shock value. His motivation is explicitly clear. He says, I share a lot of things about me, my life. I do it for a purpose. I want people to actually believe and show that I am genuine. This candor immediately disarms skepticism. It invites others to be equally open. It creates that safe space for vulnerable sharing that's just essential for the kind of community he was building. And he demonstrates this profound humility, too, which further builds trust. He'd say something like, whoever claims he's an expert, he can never be hacked. Well, wow, my respects, but I'm not that kind of person.
Right. That's refreshing, actually.
It really is. This self-effacing honesty, especially coming from someone who was wrongly labeled a master cybercriminal, is critical. It helps build trust with an audience that has every reason to be skeptical of any self-proclaimed expert. He openly acknowledges he worked his ass off to protect businesses and consumers from that type of attacker that I used to be. He points to a genuine transformation. And interestingly, he says this realization about the damage he'd done didn't happen when he was caught. It was not until I started to turn my life around and started to interact with victims that I started to understand the damage that I had done.
So direct human connection was key.
Exactly. That was his crucial epiphany. And it underlines his motivation for this radical transparency and his fervent advocacy for victims now. He believes conventional awareness campaigns often fall short because, as he puts it, criminals are better at committing crime than the common person on the street is at protecting themselves against that crime.
Sobering thought.
It is. And his most urgent plea, born directly from his criminal experience and then his transformation, is for victims to report. He says powerfully that not reporting or not calling the police on me resulted in me keeping on going because what consequences did I have? None.
Wow.
He actively works to combat the shame and the victim blaming that often prevent people from reporting cybercrimes. He notes only a tiny fraction, maybe 7% to 14% of victims actually report. And this silence just emboldens criminals. It allows them to continue unchecked. So by providing this platform for raw stories, he's actively combating that silence. He's encouraging a collective, proactive stance against these digital threats.
So he's taking what he calls a calculated risk with this openness, but it's clearly for a much greater purpose than just sharing his own stuff. Does this transparency, this strategic sharing, does it extend into his personal life too, outside of just cybersecurity topics?
Oh yes, absolutely. His approach involves what he explicitly calls calculated risk. He states, I play, but okay, always controlling and first of all understanding what the risk I'm exposed to and accepting that or not. This radical openness, used as a strategic tool for building trust, extends to very personal aspects. Most notably, meeting his fiancée online. She demonstrated immense trust by actually traveling to meet him without initially informing her family, which just highlights the truly remarkable level of faith his authenticity can inspire in people.
That's incredible trust.
It really is. And his anxiety about her safety, his efforts to have her share his details with her family, it further underscores his deep personal commitment to online trust and safety, not just in theory, but in his own lived experience. So this level of vulnerability, combined with his unique expertise, creates this uniquely compelling and trustworthy environment in his Twitter spaces. And this calculated risk also extends to his professional advocacy. He might share details about, say, a former black hat technique he once used. He knows it could potentially be misunderstood or even misused.
Right, that's a fine line.
It is. But he calculates that demonstrating his deep first-hand knowledge of criminal methodologies builds far more credibility with victims and experts than some sanitized academic approach ever could. It's about leveraging his past, even the really uncomfortable parts, to actively prevent future harm for others.
That's truly fascinating, how his personal vulnerability became such a strong foundation for these public discussions, fostering such genuine connection and trust. And it leads us directly to how these live, unscripted Twitter spaces don't just exist in isolation, they feed directly into the content of his podcast, Cyber Midnight Club. This is where it gets really interesting for me. This isn't like, some meticulously edited documentary or a formal research paper pulled from highly polished sources. No. Instead, the podcast content is drawn directly from these raw, unscripted, live conversations that actually unfolded organically in a Twitter space. So what does this mean for the listener? The casual, real-time conversations become the polished podcast content. What makes that unique? What's the core value proposition here?
Well, it begs the question, right? Why is hearing directly from those who've lived it so profoundly powerful? The core value proposition for the listener is authenticity. It's direct insight you simply cannot get from a traditional curated interview or some highly edited documentary. It's about getting those unfiltered, often spontaneous exchanges from individuals who have genuinely been there, not just observers or academics who are removed from the front lines.
Yeah, real experience.
Exactly. We're talking about voices of victims who've suffered really profound betrayal. We're talking about reformed perpetrators who, well, once used deception as a weapon.
Yeah.
And also proactive advocates who are now fighting on the front lines against this stuff.
Yeah.
It's the real-time, real-stakes conversations, the unrehearsed revelations that provide this unique depth and perspective. This immediacy often captures nuances, emotional truth that would just be lost in a more structured, post-produced format. It's like being a fly on the wall for these pivotal, candid conversations.
Can you give us some specific examples, like types of raw, unfiltered conversations that have translated directly from spaces into Cyber Midnight Club episodes? It really helps illustrate the breadth of these urgent topics and the truly unique, sometimes unsettling perspectives he brings.
Oh, absolutely. The Cyber Midnight Club podcast, because it's directly fueled by these spaces, covers this vast array of urgent, complex, often uncomfortable topics. And it's presented directly from those deeply involved. For instance, one really compelling episode is titled Cartel Surveillance, FBI Informants Targeted in Mexico City.
Wow.
Yeah. This space discussed these chilling allegations of how the Sinaloa cartel, allegedly through a network of compromised or corrupt officials, exploited Mexico City's huge network of surveillance cameras. They allegedly used them to track and brutally target FBI informants. It's a terrifying example of how sophisticated criminal organizations can repurpose public infrastructure for their own clandestine, violent operations. It reveals this profound breakdown of trust in public safety systems.
That's terrifying.
It is. Another crucial topic explored is in the episode Decoding Digital Deception, Scams, Cybersecurity, and Safeguards. This one delves into the intricate psychological and technological aspects of online scams. It highlights not just the tech vulnerabilities, but critically, how fundamental human trust is systematically exploited. They explore evolving tactics, including the frightening use of AI deepfakes to create convincing, fraudulent identities or scenarios. Oh yeah, the deepfakes are scary. They make it nearly impossible for an ordinary person to tell truth from deception. These conversations offer a truly disturbing insight into the ingenuity of cybercriminals and the profound psychological damage they inflict. You also find deep dives into the historical roots of cybercrime, like hackers, freaks, and the hunt for par, the genesis of cybercrime. That traces the evolution of hacking from early subcultures, phone phreaking, right up to its current global, multi-faceted phenomenon. It shows how the foundations were laid for today's complex cyber threats.
And what about the legal and justice aspects? Especially given Alberto's own profoundly difficult experience with the justice system. I imagine those topics must feature heavily.
They absolutely do, and with immense personal relevance for him. An episode titled Reflections on Hacking, Justice, and Cybersecurity in Latin America is particularly illustrative. It features this poignant discussion about the arrest and ongoing detention of Alberto's associate, known as Vladi, in Uruguay. This stemmed from alleged hyperactivities, specifically website defacements of government entities. The conversation within that space explored the labyrinthine legal complexities, the perceived injustices of Vladi's case. Things like issues around the confidentiality of his legal file, fundamental questions about the nature and handling of digital evidence, and the often disproportionate charges applied compared to the actual harm caused. This particular space starkly highlighted the glaring lack of cybersecurity expertise within legal systems across Latin America.
Yeah, that's a critical flaw.
A critical systemic flaw that Alberto has consistently passionately advocated about. It's a raw, unvarnished look at how the judicial system really struggles, to keep pace with the rapidly evolving digital landscape.
It sounds like these spaces really don't shy away from the nitty-gritty. They bring in perspectives that are often missing from mainstream discourse or maybe are intentionally obscured.
They absolutely do. Take, for example, the really explosive episode, Revelaciones, vulnerabilidades de confianza en dispositivos móviles. This discussion features Jonathan Scott. He's a mobile security engineer with a background working with law enforcement, and he claims to have discovered grave, persistent vulnerabilities in both Apple and Android operating systems. Vulnerabilities that allow for stealthy, nearly undetectable data extraction. Scott shares his experiences working for companies like Verizon, creating tools that bypass phone security.
Oh.
He even implies a possible collusion between government agencies and corporations to exploit these vulnerabilities. He suggests his findings make Pegasus, the infamous zero-click state-sponsored spyware.
Yeah, used against journalists, activists.
Exactly. He claims his findings make Pegasus look like a child's play, or a mere toy in comparison.
That's a huge claim.
It's an enormous claim. To say they make Pegasus look like that suggests they might offer even stealthier, more persistent, or broader data exfiltration capabilities, potentially bypassing current detection methods at a scale previously unimaginable for commercial exploits. This is the kind of explosive, first-hand account delivered with chilling detail that comes directly from these live, unscripted spaces.
And what about the hacktivism angle? You hear Anonymous mentioned frequently. How deeply do they get into that?
Very deeply. There's an episode titled Twitter Space with @SpiderBite clarifying things about #Anonymous and kind of AMA that explored really nuanced discussions on hacktivism, the decentralized, fluid structure of Anonymous, the very real threats they face, infiltration by state actors, doxing. Participants discuss corruption exposure as a primary goal and the idea that non-hacktivist participation is possible within the movement. It broadens the definition of digital activism. They delve into surprisingly technical aspects too, like how government ministries can still be susceptible to SQL injection.
Still, that's an old technique.
Right. It's a technique where malicious code is inserted into a database query, allowing attackers to access, alter, or delete sensitive data. This basic but potent attack vector remains a critical threat because of often overlooked legacy systems and just poor coding practices. Makes data exfiltration surprisingly straightforward sometimes. The conversation even touched on the dark underbelly of the internet, references to hitman services selling stolen identities on the dark web, as described by a former black hat individual who joined the space. It provides this stark, unsettling look into the criminal underworld that these experts navigate, and the immediate dangers lurking just beneath the surface of our online interactions.
That's an incredibly diverse and, yeah, often unnerving range of topics, all stemming from these live conversations. What other, maybe global or national cybersecurity issues have been covered that came directly from spaces?
There's an episode on Uruguay's digital surveillance landscape and cybersecurity regulations. That critically discusses Decree 66025, which is Uruguay's effort to enhance cybersecurity. But it also includes sharp scrutiny of El Guardian, a secretive surveillance system that has raised significant privacy concerns among citizens and human rights advocates there. Another one, update on Europe's largest energy outage Twitter Space, speculates about the origins of a massive Spanish power outage, including discussions about potential cyber attack origins versus the official explanations. It highlights the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure.
Yeah, that's always a worry.
Definitely. And then there's unveiling the truth of #FreeGeorgia, #Anonymous. Here, discussions cover allegations of government oppression, arbitrary arrests of young protesters in Georgia, and Anonymous's cyber warfare against the Georgian government. In one particularly raw moment, a participant stated they had the capability to shut down the whole Georgian government, which illustrates the extreme, often alarming capabilities discussed.
Good grief.
These conversations are raw, they're unscripted, and they offer perspectives often completely hidden from the public eye. Alberto's unique approach as a host, combining his intensely personal journey with this open, non-judgmental forum, is absolutely crucial. It fosters an environment of such candor, such courageous sharing. And that is precisely why his podcast content is so rich, so impactful, and fundamentally different from pretty much anything else out there.
This sounds like a powerful model, not just for broadcasting information or sharing stories, but for building something much larger. So this isn't just about individual deep dives into specific incidents, is it? It feels more like a unique form of collective defense, community building. What stands out to you about the impact this has had? Beyond just the individual deep dives, what's the ripple effect here?
Well, it begs that question again, doesn't it? When an individual shares their story of profound injustice, what are the broader implications for societal change? For Alberto, his journey from prisoner to advisor has led to significant shifts, far beyond his initial reach. His spaces facilitate this unplanned convergence of victims, former criminals, experts in different fields.
That mix sounds powerful.
It is. This spontaneous collective sharing leads to profound insights and ultimately a unique form of collective defense against digital threats. It's about creating that safe, non-judgmental space for people to come forward, share experiences without fear, and collectively figure out ways to protect themselves and others. It's the community that amplifies the individual story, turning that personal trauma into a kind of shared shield.
So his personal story, shared through these digital platforms, amplified by this community,
Hmm,
it essentially ignited a ripple effect that transcended his immediate circumstances.
exactly. His story unexpectedly gained global reach. He recounts being connected with this person on Twitter who was a heavyweight in Germany, a connection that allowed his story to be broadcast all over the world. This just vividly demonstrates the power of digital platforms. They transcend geographical boundaries, they amplify individual voices in ways traditional media rarely can, or maybe rarely chooses to. But perhaps the most impactful result, the real testament to his resilience and persistent advocacy, is that Alberto Daniel Hill is now being asked to advise the Uruguayan Congress on new cybersecurity laws.
No kidding. From prisoner to advisor.
Literally. He is using his own case, his personal ordeal, as a living, breathing example of the egregious flaws in the current legal and judicial system there. This profound shift, as he describes it, was basically triggered by your case. He went from being a target of the system to a consultant shaping his future.
That is an astonishing turnaround. I mean, from being unjustly persecuted by the system to now directly advising it, what kind of specific changes has this advocacy led to in Uruguay's cybersecurity structure? What tangible impact has his story had?
His case led to significant, tangible changes, right at the highest levels of Uruguay's cybersecurity infrastructure. He recounts that the former directors of cybersecurity at Interpol, the Uruguayan CERT, their Computer Emergency Response Team, and even the head of security for the presidency have been removed or replaced.
Wow, major shakeup.
Huge. There's now a completely new structure. A dedicated cybersecurity unit has been established in Uruguay with specifically trained professionals. And critically, a cybercrime prosecutor has been appointed who knows Alberto's case pretty well. That indicates a direct, informed approach to future cases. It demonstrates a systemic, institutional response to the critical issues he exposed through his personal ordeal and his relentless advocacy. It underscores his fervent desire for digital platforms to step up to provide us to voice and amplify. He recognizes their indispensable role in fostering this kind of societal change. And his broader message of advocacy, echoing throughout his spaces and his podcast, is crystal clear. He believes that sharing his story, no matter how uncomfortable or painful it is, could save just one person from being hurt. He's fundamentally transforming his individual trauma into this powerful force for good, emphasizing that the reward is not for you when you speak out, but it's for others who might be vulnerable. He repeatedly highlights the profound shame and victim blaming that often prevent people from reporting cybercrimes, noting again that tiny fraction, 7–14%, who actually come forward. This silence, he argues, just emboldens criminals. It allows them to continue their activities unchecked, perpetuating this horrible cycle of harm. So by providing this platform for raw, uncensored stories, he's actively combating that silence. He's breaking down the stigma, encouraging a collective, proactive stance against digital threats. It's a powerful and, frankly, effective model for turning personal pain into public protection.
Alberto Daniel Hill's story is truly extraordinary. It really is a testament to incredible resilience and the transformative power of digital platforms when they're used for genuine connection, for advocacy. His personal log into hell, as he might put it, those dark days of unjust imprisonment, public vilification ultimately became a log out to hope for so many. His experiences are now actively shaping a more just, a more secure digital future in his home country. And his voice is inspiring countless others globally to find their own voice, to share their truths, and to join this collective defense against digital deception.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does it truly mean to know someone, or even to trust information, in this digital age? Especially when so much is mediated and deception is just rampant everywhere. And how will our collective courage, our willingness to share our own vulnerabilities and experiences, and critically, our willingness to truly listen to authentic voices on these platforms, how will that shape the very fabric of online interaction moving forward? Something profound to think about, I think, particularly as we all navigate this increasingly complex and interconnected digital landscape.